it's wonderful to hear that you're taking this moment to do like a self retreat. I was wondering what has that been like for you, and like how did you develop that for yourself?
Yeah, I decided, I've been traveling a lot these last few months, and it's the beginning of a stretch of 6 weeks, which is a long time for me to be at home right now. And so I'm like, why don't I start it with some intentional practice time? And luckily for me, at the moment, my roommate's not here, and so I can actually more freely practice and kind of be in silence and be in that flow without, just incidental life interruptions, which is like totally fine. And a real treat if I do want to practice at home in more of a secluded way.
Yeah. And then when it comes to intention, does that mean that you're maybe not going out to the movies for that duration of the retreat, or that means that you're more so participating in things like going to the movies or hanging out with friends, but with like a different type of intention?
Well, I'm just realizing now, this is other than chanting this morning, this is the first time I'm actually talking to somebody. So that's maybe giving you a flavor of it's pretty secluded. So at least the way that I've designed this is that I'm like functionally available to family who's around, and I help out sometimes with them, and so it's like I'm available for that type of, need, and certainly communication via text. But I'm not responding to social questions and inquiries, and really paring down to necessity and in terms of communication. And then my time is primarily sitting and walking and cooking and just cleaning around the apartment, and some reading as well, some study. So yeah, that's how it's structured right now. And yeah, and it's going pretty well. It's not too tight or rigid of a container. At least in my estimation, it's not like complete silence, phone is off. But it's really yeah, it is pulling away from maybe those more social activities, which it's like I'm available. If my sister needs me, I'm going to go over and help out, and that's totally fine. It doesn't feel like a breach of this time. And when I'm done with that, I'll just kind of come back and continue with kind of a sitting and walking and kind of study orientation. But while I'm with them, it will be actually just my orientation, my intention in that time will be around, kind of really staying present, embodied in a way that I don't know, I could say that I have aspirations to do all of the time, but certainly within a more constructed container, it's easier to like continue that flow and actually just notice when I'm not there, and it's fine. If I'm playing with a 5-year-old, it's totally fine. If I'm playing with a 10-month old, it's totally fine. And it's an interesting way of practicing just to see where the habits of mind, go and pull me. Yeah.
Certainly. Well, it's really wonderful that you created this container, and I think that's a great word for it too, because like I feel like there's something very powerful about setting that intention, following through on that intention. But then when you look at your calendar, I don't know how you organize it in that sense, but just having a maybe some more space in your calendar, then you're like, oh, that's right, that's my intentional space. I kind of set that time aside to do this type of work, and then also too having that flexibility with yourself where should something come up, should you need to be in a supportive role and kind of spontaneously or otherwise, um, it doesn't feel like it's a breach. And I feel like sometimes there can be so much pressure to be like, well, no, I set this intention, and like I if I don't do this correctly, then it feels like I'm not getting the um, full experience that I initially set out for. So I think that's really wonderful. And then when it comes to your study, I mean, has something so far um, deepened your understanding or otherwise been something that has been of interest of yours that you've explored, or is it kind of remembering and kind of like looking over some things that you've taken a look at before already?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. Yeah, there are there are so many there's so many things I'd like to read. And when I say things, I'm really specifically thinking in this moment around like suttas, like the, translations of Pali texts. Sometimes, other kind of, Mahayana texts or Vajrayana texts. Um, but primarily within the Pali Canon is where right in this moment, in these last few months, I've been turning toward, and yeah, reviewing or actually just reading things that I just haven't had the opportunity to read yet, just given time. That and I recently sat a 9 bodies retreat, which is a particular methodology of practice that Philip Moffat has developed to offer these teachings that he learned in India. That are based on old, thousands of years pre-Buddha Vedic teachings, right? So, but a certain particular spin through the teacher that he learned from. And so I recently sat on a retreat and that intrigued me. So I'm just reading a bit more about yeah, that framework and the whole cosmology and the supportive ways that it could be just I don't know, a skillful means as a support to reframe certain avenues or levels of consciousness that not levels, but aspects of consciousness that we can be aware of. So that's just like, yeah, something that's like, oh, caught my attention, caught my curiosity, and it doesn't mean I'm gonna be doing that for the remainder of my practice in a very intensive way, but it's like, oh, I know a lot of people who've been doing that practice, and I just sat a retreat, and there was something there that I was like, oh, there's some framing that I find supportive, and so I'd like to learn a bit more about.
Yeah, and in the nature of the retreat, or I don't know how it's understood, but is there some direct correlation to, well, this is something that predates the Buddha, but does it when you were in the retreat, were they saying kind of like, and this is a similar vehicle to what some Buddhist practice has kind of evolved into, or that it pulls from? Like, does it feel like you are engaging with a fundamental or a foundational element of Buddhist practice, or do you feel like it is something that can be applied and help round out some corners or deepen practice for you in a certain way?
At least the way that I understand it right now is that it was as I imagine, right? I haven't, I haven't, read too much of the book yet or really studied outside of it. But from what I'm imagining is, in what I kind of know, right? It predates the Buddha's, this framework of practice. And so it's like, I'm imagining, we know that there were so many people that were practicing different, practices of samadhi, for example. And I feel like this is probably one of the myriad ways that folks were practicing and exploring. And it's not one the Buddha spoke about, but I imagine a lot of people at that time were actually practicing and using it as a means of developing samadhi. And so in that way, I imagine the Buddha was around at like this certain framework, but he didn't pick it up as maybe the most easeful one for people to use and chose, the breath as a more proper vehicle or something. That's what I'm imagining. So it's certainly not Buddhist per se, and he, didn't pick it up and offer it as a practice as, a direct support. And as a vehicle for supporting samadhi, I don't feel that I feel that it could be a supportive use to then, put in the Buddhist framework of like Vipassana or insight orientation, of a meditation practice on top of the samadhi that you can establish through that pathway. So
Mm.
that's how it was kind of explained to me, and that's how I imagine it's kind of non-conflict working. But again, it's not, my practice. I haven't fully picked it up, but I'm exploring it and it seems interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's wonderful. And then too, I would just like, because I just to speak to how special this container is for you, especially when as you're kind of picking up these books, and some of them being things that you've read before, and some of them being things that you're exploring now. Um, I remember reading that your first kind of maybe thorough introduction, or maybe resonance or connection to Buddhist figures, or maybe Buddhism in general, was reading Thich Nhat Hanh, and I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just kind of going over how you came across Thich Nhat Hanh when you were younger. I think it was in your teenage years that you found him, and I was wondering what brought you in through that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, I think I could connect simple dots that, there could be a long, long story, but we don't need to even actually go there. But what like kind of the one kernel I think of importance is that my family came to this country as refugees. And so like I was aware of that. I knew that we were the only ones here, from the family. And so that was in my system. And so, when Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about being a refugee, a political refugee, which is also the reason why our family needed to leave, that there was a hook there. Um, and just around war and violence and all of that. It's like, oh, resonance. But then also, um, as a kid, as a younger kid, um, one of the activities my father and invited us into, I don't even know if it was optional, but it didn't feel oppressive, but was watching the evening news with him and then talking about it. So when I was like 4 or 5, this was an activity that we did, not really age appropriate, but that's what he decided to do. And I just remember like really like I still remember like really taking in the Gulf War is happening. It's because of oil. People are dying. This is about money. What is going on? Adults should know better, right? It was like my child mind. Like adults should know better. This is ridiculous. Um, and so there was like kind of that like kernel of like disillusionment with the world as I was like a kid. I was like, wait, adults are screwing it up. Like they don't even know what it's about, like life, And so like that is like a really like kind of core memory actually for me and like this fundamental confusion around the world and life and what this was all about because they adults like they were not making any sense and people were actually dying and so that's my my little kid self was recognizing this. And I think what also kind of crystallized it is that just I mean by happenstance you could say, but my siblings and I, we ended up having a friend who was from Kuwait due to that conflict, due to that war. And so it was like a very concrete, oh, Naria is here because of this conflict and violence, and I'm seeing it on the news, and we are also displaced due to conflict and violence. And so it was just like it was very real. It was not theoretical to like little child me. So it's like, yeah, certain disillusionment with like adults, they don't even know what they're doing when I was a kid. And then also just a reflection of, a similar, right? Not the same, a similar path that Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about. And so when I read his words as a teenager, he was just confirming so many things that I knew to be true. And also, like, I think the clincher for me was like the fact that greed, aversion, delusion also lives in my heart. And I knew that. And so it wasn't just like them out there. It was like, I want to protect the world and myself from like colluding with all of these things that I find troublesome. And I know I'm not exempt. And so he was really explicitly like just pointing out what I see in the world. Yes, confirmation, I see that resonance, but also it's not just about that. It's also about this. And actually, this is where we begin. And yeah, through different family examples, right? I actually knew that we could be kind of agents of change, agents of compassion, agents of wisdom in the world. And I wanted a practice to support me in that process.
Wow, that is it's such a wonderful thing to hear how what seems like maybe empowering that resource of Thich Nhat Hanh was in the sense of, and also just to like how, the nature of your education as far as like how the world works, quote unquote, and like having these experiences as a young person, seeing the adults really not know how to handle like the same rules that we got when we were in kindergarten. Like I think I remember I also have a core memory where I was in a doctor's office and I saw that list of like everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten. And I was looking at the list, I was like, it's all right here. Like, wow,
Yeah.
how come we don't do this? I was in a pediatrician's office. I couldn't believe it. But
Yeah.
and yet here we are, and here we
Mm.
are all the time. And
Yep.
so for you to be able to uh grow up with that kind of awareness, but also too, like as a teenager, I'm just really impressed, considering you were dealing with some really heavy, intense, traumatic things, and then you pick up this book, and you can't unsee elements of the world, and then you pick up this book and you kind of feel seen by it, but also too, you had the capacity as a teenager to not just see, look at all the injustices, look at all the sufferings, look at all the things that greed and delusion and hatred, all these things have wrought, but also too to see like, well, this is also an internal thing for me. And I feel like that takes like a certain degree of awareness and bravery that takes, for some people, like many more years to cultivate. So I think it's just really wonderful that you had that, and that you had that resource to kind of help you map that and apply that and become that agent of compassion and change, which is really wonderful. And then I before we kind of get further into your Buddhist path, I know that music is really important for you. It's very prominent, especially the violin. I was wondering, is there something about your pursuit and your practice of music that has some kind of correlation with compassion, or if it has maybe something a little bit less they can't quite be as articulated.
Mhm. Well, I think the way I relate to music now is it's much different than I related when I was growing up. And when I was growing up, it was, well, I want to say from high school forward, because before it was just like something I had the opportunity to do and I was learning and I wasn't thinking too much about it. But in high school, I started playing chamber music pretty seriously. And it was like, I don't know. It really opened my eyes in a way that I didn't expect. And I suppose it maybe is hard to relate to if unless you play music or have something like that in your life, but it was showing me, right, the way that we have kind of like certain agency around musicality, like, because it's like a conductorless, small ensemble chamber music. And so it's like we have like, the musical decisions to make and we can play around with them and decide them together. There was like a real orientation to this democratic process and the experimentation and the full embodiment. And there was something about working with others, being locked in together that was kind of surrendering to a process and we didn't know what was going to come out of that, and we weren't fixed to anything, so it was just this kind of alive amorphous creative process that we were all leaning into, that we were all shape shifting and moving around, that we were being surprised by. And there was like an element of freedom there that I did not touch anywhere else, especially with people, right? So it's like one thing to be by myself and feel like relaxed and kind of free, but another thing to be in a process, an engaged process with others, and have joy and freedom and open-mindedness. And like it wasn't about like me having my, view heard, or like, always having to do what somebody else said, but it was just really organic and alive. And it felt like this is something important actually, to like feel into, to live into, to like have a template of, to move in the world with. So that's really kind of what hooked me and what took me forward, and in music in particular, that was so enticing for me and kind of life-giving. And yeah, I mean, there's more I could say about it, but that is actually what the hook was and how it still lives in me in many ways. And then there are layers and layers added on over time.
Yeah. I mean, that does sound like a pretty profound feeling
Yeah.
where you're yeah, you can have that liberated quality where you're practicing uh with by yourself, and you're just kind of letting the music kind of flow through you or whatever it is, and just like having that freedom element and that expressive element too. But then when it's with others, and to have that kind of uh connection that is creative, that is kind of surprising in the way that it can kind of feel supported. You kind of feel like there's a lot of trust, and there's a lot of just like and there's also just this beauty, right? Of just like you're also making music, and it's very powerful music as well.
Mhm.
So no, that's wonderful. And then now, and then you went on to get a master's in the violin and in music. And I was wondering, when you got to that point, did it I think that you had been in maybe New York, or you had maybe started having some more Dharma experiences. I was wondering, at what point did you maybe kind of start seeing some correlations, if any, between the two?
Um, hmm, that's a good question. I don't know if I've ever articulated it to myself when I started kind of seeing those correlations. But I mean, I think it was really, even from my teenage years, that I could feel like it was like a somatic sense of freedom that I was oriented to. So even sitting and meditating had a similar element of not knowing, of being connected, of like, just being curious, being like embodied, like moving along with the stream of life as it unfolds, that was so similar to the feeling of being in a chamber ensemble and moving along with life as we were musically unfolding it. Like that feeling was the same very early on. And so I don't know. I don't like I've gotten questions from other people about how I've connected music and Dharma, but I've never connected them, but they've always been connected, if that makes sense. Or, from this point of chamber music, it's always been kind of an embodied connection, but I haven't like really thought through, this connects, this connects, this connects. Yeah.
Mm, mm. Oh, and then, and I can appreciate that too, where they have are their own kind of forms, and yet when you're in one form, you can kind of access elements of the
Hmm.
other one.
Right.
I know I used to do a lot of like improvisational theater, like it was
Yeah.
specifically within a comedic element,
Yeah.
and there is a lot of heightened awareness of the present, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of like creative flow where it's like, well, you could go through the bullet points of like, well, I guess that's kind of what this is, but they're very much their own kind of
Yeah.
scenes in their own way. Also, um and then when it comes to musicality in general, because I remember that you had mentioned for this retreat, and maybe elsewhere too in your life, there's like a chanting practice.
Mm.
Do you notice that kind of opens something up for you in particular, that feels like a an element of practice that is maybe, I guess, like impacts you differently than maybe um reading suttas, or maybe sitting in meditation and having mindful intentions does to you. I was wondering, what, like, does chanting do something in particular for you? Do you have like a particular fondness for it, considering your background in music?
Mm. I imagine I am a little biased. I enjoy chanting, and I I think one of the things early on that, as I kind of added it into my practice, one of the things early on that I enjoyed about it was just like the physical resonant, quality that it has in the body. So there's just like a lot of silence and stillness, when I'm, sitting. um, and to bring in this other element of chanting, there's so much more movement and a felt sense of like just the alive quality of being here. And and so there's something about that, again, just like on a very kind of visceral somatic level, that's captivating for me. Um, and I think just as hmm, it's a very different process to read, to kind of be silent in my own kind of meditative process, and then to hear something, whether I'm saying it or whether another person is saying it. And there's something about hearing that for me really is a different pathway of integration. And so yeah, there, like, I don't know, if it's because of music, but I definitely do have a sensitivity to hearing, because it's like it goes in a different part of my brain and processes it differently. So yeah, I don't know how else to say that, but it's a different process to take it in.
Yeah, and you take it in through yourself. It's a very unique phenomenon, I suppose.
Yeah.
Uh, so sometimes I notice that too, like where I'll be going through my emotions or my routine with like, where I'll sit. I have a Soto Zen practice, and I'll
Mhm.
sit in shikantaza, and I'll do that.
Mhm.
And sometimes mentally, I'll be thinking about tens of hundreds of different things, and then every once in a while, I'll be like, oh wow, like look at what my body's doing. Like my body is showing up.
Yeah.
Wow, like, but my head's not there, but my body has shown up. Interesting.
Mm.
Where I maybe suppose, like, when you hear your voice do the thing, it can kind of like reorient you in a very powerful way, where it's like my body, my voice is showing up for me right now. And
Yeah.
I think that or if not showing up, but just like it is otherwise connecting you into what your intention is, which is really powerful. And then
Mm.
for the way that you have gone through your Buddhist path so far, you had those earlier experiences with the books of Thich Nhat Hanh, and then I know that when you went to New York, that's where maybe more or less, and please correct me, but like that's where you kind of started to have some Dharma friends, have a little bit more of like a Sangha community, and I believe that is uh, mostly within the Vipassana insight communities. I was
Mm.
wondering what that experience was for you, finding the New York Insight Society. and and what it was like for you to explore. And I don't know if you ended up in other places, because I know that there's Vajrayana is a part of your retreat experience right now. But I was wondering what it was like for you to explore, and also to kind of find yourself committing towards uh, one tradition over others.
Yeah. Mm. Well, I had been before I got to New York. I had because I read the books of Thich Nhat Hanh. I was convinced that he had a good point, and and he laid out mindfulness and sila were essentially the ways that I entered into practice. So I didn't start meditating actually immediately. A few years later, I was curious about meditation because I was like, okay, I can really be mindful of my own conduct, of my thoughts, of my speech, and that was plenty of practice for several years. And then I was like, he keeps talking about meditation. Maybe I should like, be curious. And so I sat and I was like, oh, there's something here. There's something, yeah, important here as well. And so I had been meditating on my own, really based on, simple instruction in books for many years. And yeah, and I'd kind of looked around for sanghas before I got to New York, but never really felt like, yeah, like I'd rather just meditate by myself. And and it wasn't until I went to New York Insight Meditation Center here in New York that I felt like, oh, one, there was like a teacher that was really, I think for me, honestly, it was just like it was Gina Sharp, and she was talking about like politics in the world today and tying it directly to Dharma, just as Thich Nhat Hanh did in the books. Like there wasn't this kind of what felt to me in so many other spaces like a false separation of like dharma and life is out there, but dharma buddha dharma this in this space, and it was just like that doesn't resonate. Like I kind of get what you're doing, and and I can see maybe the benefits of that or something maybe, but that is not how I relate. This is not how I was introduced. That's not my practice. Like I need them integrated. And so yeah, that was what Gina Sharp was doing. She was just, talking about life, and yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm practicing for life. So this is great. um, and and the community was great. It was a very vibrant community, and and I'm a bit of an introvert, so it wasn't that I like wanted to talk to people, but I also felt welcome in the space, right? So I was like, oh, I could be here, be comfortably invisible, but like if I wanted to say something, I wouldn't feel too scared. So it was just like, okay, cool. Like I think I can be here and be comfortable, and I'm certainly receiving teachings that like land for me and fit kind of the image of my practice. So yeah, so that was kind of, and it's interesting in the way you phrased the question, because I didn't think of it at the time as switching like lineages, right? Thich Nhat Hanh, Zen, Mahayana. And all I heard was like life. Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about life in BuddhaDharma, and Gina Sharp is talking about life in BuddhaDharma. So it wasn't conceptual in my mind. And Thich Nhat Hanh taught a lot of Vipassana, frankly, and Brahma Vihars. So it wasn't like the practice was that different, honestly, for quite some time. It didn't appear to me as so different, I could say, because the Dharma talks were really in the community was what I was going for at the time, and the practices themselves didn't actually appear so much in contrast.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you found the thing that kind of resonated with you with the Thich Nhat Hanh, like reading Thich Nhat Hanh, and then you found that kind of I'm practicing for life, like and life is the thing that is happening right now. It's,
Yeah.
it's, it's so you're like, oh, well, there are things happening that influence on an external basis that influence my
Mm,
internal basis, and so there's all these things that are related, and there's not these uh maybe for you those kind of more dharma approaches that are, well, let's create this space where we talk about things in a certain way that are somehow closed off from the outside world. Like let's talk about how this is like all of this is integrated into everything else.
mhm.
I think that's a wonderful thing that you found that for yourself, and were able to begin. And then I love finding a space where you can be comfortably invisible is very relatable and very I don't know. There's something very fun about that phrasing for me. And well, and so I was wondering about like this, because I don't know if you would consider yourself an engaged Buddhist, but I know that you have a lot of experience with engaged Buddhism, and uh, this is something that I think about every once in a while. I don't know why, but there are all kinds of different um, center insight centers, Zen centers, Zen temples, you name it, that are in existence, especially in America. And there are, at some points, I think, choices between those institutions or those centers deciding whether or not they will say something like Black Lives Matter, or whether they will talk about different civil rights issues, or climate anxieties, and talking about advocation for certain causes and things like that. And some centers and some temples and things choose not to include any kind of literature or any kind of like tabs on their website about it, because it leaves them open to um, being able to address every single problem that comes up in the world as it comes up, without feeling like they have to address every single political or otherwise social issue, and have to have conversations about that, and that getting complicated for them. But then there are also some other institutions that specifically want to show uh, their conversations around these topics in a very visible way, and to have actually a hand in supporting people that are affected by different sufferings that are happening on behalf of society, the climate, and things like that. I was wondering, like, how do you do you have an opinion of, or do you have a feeling about those two different approaches? And I'm kind of generalizing it by putting it into two different approaches. But is there something about one or the other that feels particularly appealing to you, and how does that kind of shape how you engage with those causes too, like from a place of dharma?
Mhm. Yeah. I guess my my general stance is I'm not going to tell anyone to do what they don't want to do. I think their behavior and actions will speak for themselves. Um, and their words, right? So it's, yeah, like I feel like it's complicated, and I feel like it's so many things, right? I am you know, technically I have some social media, but I mostly don't. And I do remember, I'm remember like when I started that sentence, I was thinking of one thing, but I was like, oh, a flood of other things came in. There are so many times in which, right, there's an expectation, right, like on social media, just for an individual. Let's not even talk about institutions for a moment, to comment and say something. And it's like, well, I know as an individual, I can't do that for everything. And yeah, I don't necessarily actually want to spend my time and energy that way. And, to be in responsible conversation about that on social media isn't what I want to do. Some people, it's like, yeah, it needs to happen and I'm going to do it. And I'm like, good, like probably should be spoken about. And that's just not me. And we can actually do different things and it'd be fine. So, I mean, and we like, so that's maybe like an individual, and, it's like, I'm also not like a person with a lot of power, a lot of influence. And so I think that that also has a factor to play in. And, if we think about institutions, right, that, again, they have a broad base of people, looking up to them, if it's a Buddhist, space, place, center, that might be taking certain cues from them. And so there might be a different type of responsibility there. Um, Again, what's happening on social media and what's happening in the physical rooms and spaces, if you go to that place, might be wildly different. And so it's like, I'm not going to make general, kind of statements or claims about who is or is not doing X, Y, or Z based on one metric or another. But I do think that there are important issues that need to be spoken about. And there's kind of an integrated Dharma that actually brings life in and actually points to and speaks to, principles of non-harm, and however broad and specific you want to name those elements. And so for that to be an active part of the Dharma, sila, um, is important. And just in the ways that I don't know, I think there can be a certain way that people can feel a lack of responsibility or a certain distance from um I don't know, the world, you know, whatever that might be. And so it is around the curiosity of what is here in front of you, what is reachable, doable, right? If we're talking about engaged practice, there's plenty of opportunity to do mutual aid. It doesn't need to be in the name of BuddhaDharma, but it's like as a person in the world, when there are people in need, participate, you know, if you have time, if you have the means, if you can, you know, cook extra food in your meal and, you know, take it to a particular place where people can, you know, partake. Like, you know, there are so many ways in which we can like live a life, and it doesn't have to be around kind of, I don't know, titles are showing, you know, where this good heart is coming from, right? And so like there are so many ways in which we can, I don't know, disengage unnecessarily. And maybe it's out of habit, maybe it's like not actually taking the time to get to know what is available for you to plug into. Maybe it's right, a feeling, a sense of overwhelm that needs attention and, you know, care, compassion. All like there's so many, yeah, there's so many different ways to, I think, engage, and it's not going to look the same for everyone. But I think I'm like, I'm like, should I? It's like I would hope that all of us are curious about engaging in one way or another.
Mm.
I'll say that.
And thank you. Yeah, I know that was like it's a big question, and I appreciate your openness to the complexity of it, and also to kind of bring it into a lot of really relatable um, ways or concepts for me, because like there's this thing of well, just because it's a part of an institution, or like maybe there are there's some infrastructure with a certain institution that can help with certain elements of a cause. There's nothing wrong with you just on an individual basis, just anyone on an individual basis, cooking a little bit more food to then give it to somebody. It doesn't necessarily have to have, well, this is the Red Cross that's doing this, and I'm like handing it to this official thing, where it's like, well, maybe the way that I help, if I'm comfortably invisible, maybe I just like help with setting up a free library somewhere, and that's how I contribute to this thing. Or maybe it's with talking to my family or talking to friends about the things that I'm concerned about in the world. Maybe that can do something, maybe just showing compassion for someone in small gestures, or participating in those kind of larger movements can be of help. Yeah, so thank you. It's a topic that, like, as more things keep happening, I just like it is something that I think institutions have to kind of make a decision on, or otherwise might have internally some conversations about. So thank you for that. And
Yeah.
then when it comes to your experience with I guess with Thich Nhat Hanh too, and also just with your experiences at Union Theological Seminary. I know at a time you were functioning as the director of programming in Buddhist Studies, and also for the Thich Nhat Hanh program for Engaged Buddhism. And there's like a podcast, um, uh, or there may be a video cast that's called like Dharma and Justice,
Mhm.
and that was something, that a series that I think that you had a part of. And I was wondering, like, how what your experiences like were participating in that, and if there was certain issues that you felt like uh particularly connected to when you were discussing elements of Dharma, and things that can be helpful when being applied to things that are feeling that they're being compromised justice wise, or feeling that there are injustices happening.
Right. Yeah, and I think, you know, Union Theological Seminary is a great example of an institution that's like, hey, we're gonna just, you know, say what we think about all the political mess that we're in. And it's really, at least for me, it feels good to be in an environment and an institution that is, you know, I mean, it has its whole legacy of that is how it was founded, and it's willing to be in the fire and taking the risk and just saying, this is not okay. There are better ways for us to behave with one another in this world. And yeah, it does, at least for me, it felt so good to be in that environment for those reasons. I felt a certain freedom of, you know, just being able to kind of be out yeah, with yeah, with a tender heart and wanting to I don't know, express a certain clarity that I see on various topics. Um, and it not having to be like the right way or the only way, but just a conversation. It's one of those conversations we can have at the dinner table. Everything's on open, and so being a part of that conversation, like the Dharma and Justice dialogues, and kind of visioning it and carrying it out over, maybe about 5 years. I mean, it was, I don't know, it was an honor. It was so wonderful to be in conversation with so many um, people, and, just witnessing, often I wasn't the person in conversation, but I was just like facilitating, bringing people together to be in conversations about topics that were either important or interesting or both, and, kind of needed in a certain way. I don't think that there was any one particular topic that like stood out as like, that like kind of stays with me, but I just remember kind of the importance of each of these topics having airtime. Kind of there being, friction, not in a bad way, but just like this conversation of moving back and forth, and considering different angles and topics around a theme. I think that too, it's too rare for there to be public discourse around topics that might make people uncomfortable. And it's like, how do we stay in conversation, lean in together, because we do care about our society, we do care about this world, and the only way we're going to like kind of find new ways is to be in conversation, and to think together, to dream up together, and to have diverse ways of seeing the world, so that like something new can actually come about. And so it felt like, while it was, just maybe a drop in the bucket and such a small thing in one way, it was maybe opening up this possibility for, just seeds being planted and something else to happen down the line. And yeah, just I felt like an important thread just to add to the stream of things moving about in the ether.
Yeah, no, it's really special, and I haven't had a chance to watch all of them, but like there's like a really large volume of them that are available, and it does seem like there's something very special about having access to those. So thank you for being a part of that project, facilitating it, and getting these people together to have these conversations. Because yeah, like having uh, around sensitive topics, around important topics, it's great to have people in real time having conversations. Uh, Learning something from each other about it, and
Hmm.
and maybe we can all, as listeners, we can kind of pick up something about it too. And also too, I mean, like, I wanted to bring this up just a touch later, but I think it's important now. Is like some of the things that you have coming up are some online events, and maybe yeah, I believe that they're both online events. Um, well, maybe not actually, but one of them is Rooted in Refuge, Moved by Intention, A Courageous Heart in a Polarized World. This is happening on October 25th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. And this is, yeah, I think this is in person at New York Insight Meditation Center, as well as online, excuse me. And I just wanted to see if you wouldn't mind just speaking a little bit about this upcoming thing, because it just feels like there are some tools and some resources here about how to approach this time. And if you don't mind, I would love to learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I mean that's a that's a great question. I mean the title kind of speaks for itself in a certain way, right? It was really it is going to be my attempt at offering a day of practice that allows us to kind of land together, to feel yeah, a certain sense of groundedness, a certain sense of gathering our intention, our energy, to find refuge, to find a place of rest. Because we're so fragmented, so many of us, be given given so much of the politics of the time, right? And it's not only the politics, but our lives are actually quite impacted by the ripples of all that's affecting our nervous system. And so everything to, just the conversations we have with our friends and our loved ones is impacted by these larger threads. And so it's like, how can we come in together, land, kind of like rest to some degree, allow our hearts to really be nourished by a day of practice, and then really reorienting with this intention, so that we can we can just kind of regroup and move from there. What is our deepest intention for this world? Right? Is it, love? Is it, goodwill? Is it what is it? Is it non-harm? It could be so many things, right? But it's hopefully going to be this opportunity to come rest, um, exhale, and deeply connect again to, it's like, oh yeah, what are we doing here? What would the heart actually want to move into, want to move from? Moving in this world really demands a certain courage just to be in the fires of this time. And how can I do that from a resourced place? So that's the invitation for that day long. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful, and thank you for making it something that's available for people, whether near or far from the New York Insight Meditation Center. Yeah, because I was looking at the description for it. It talks about uh, kind of developing or discussing Theravadan Buddhist teachings on wise view, wise intention, and wise action, and that kind of uh, being exercised through exploring the inner dignity of hiri, otherwise like self-respect, and the
Mm-hmm.
steadying presence of sada, faith and confidence. And it's just like it's a wonderful. It's just like how often do we have occasions to explore this? And so I really am appreciative of you doing that. And just while we're on the promotion note, I wanted to mention that you also have something coming up very soon, the Compass of Wise Intention, which is online at 2 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, September 21st, and this is through Sangha.live. And is there anything that you'd like to say about this upcoming event?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it really is almost like a precursor to the day long in a certain way. It's just reminding us that in in the ways that we're kind of swirling and moving in the world, we actually have this tool, wise intention, from the Eightfold Path that can orient us, that can be, when we feel kind of lost, when we feel frustrated, when we feel angry, it's like, okay, like I'm irritated, but what am I going to do next? And then I can orient with this wise intention and make sure I don't regret the next step in the process, or whatever comes out of the mouth. And it's really just to help reorient us, again and again and again. It's a simple way that I've found that, like, when I can get fired up, it's like to pause is really helpful, and just to be like, okay, for whatever reason, this is happening now, but all I can, manage to control is my next, move. And so what do I want that to be? And that, can give us some locus of control in the chaos of today.
Certainly, there is something very powerful and intoxicating when that kind of surge of like that fired upness comes up, and you're like, "Oh, I have so much energy. Let's go do something about it." And it's like, "No, no, no, wait, wait. Let's like, well, let's just put it where it needs to go." There's the or like be aware of it first and see how we can have an outlet for it. So thank you for offering something that helps you kind of understand that wise intention, wise action, and everything there. And then also too, I wanted to bring attention to your website, peace.com, where you offer one-on-one meditation mentorship, insight dialogue, teaching and speaking, and also there's an availability, I believe, for working within the music capacity with helping people that are interested in deepening their work with the violin. Is there anything that you'd like to offer promotion wise? Anything like you're working on, or like maybe something else that another foundation or another group is working on that you'd like to have some more eyes and ears on?
There isn't any. Let me pause. I'm like, yeah, there isn't any one particular place or, yeah, organization or foundation that, yeah, I'd want to necessarily direct people to. But I will, um, yeah, just encourage people to think about ways that they can contribute in this, fiery world, and in ways that have impact, and however small and large. It really does matter. It really does matter whether it's, one-on-one interaction, or a contribution to an organization, an institution of sorts. It really matters to, like, use our life energy to move in the world in ways that live out the world we want to live in. So just the encouragement for each of you to find whatever that means for you. Um, yeah, I think it's an important move. Yeah.
Certainly, certainly, and you make it feel very accessible in that way, where even just being kind in a moment to somebody, even if it's to yourself, that there can be like that can be that small and have a great impact. And then I just have one last question as we wrap up. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I just wanted to ask if there is this is more broad. If there's any advice that you'd want to give to somebody that is walking the Buddhist path that you would have wanted to have heard as you were coming through it.
Hmm. That's a great question. Hmm. I think my advice would be something about engaging with the Sangha that that is connected, yes, in the meditation space, but also beyond that as spiritual friends. Having spiritual friends is one of the most meaningful, aspects of our lives. And so to not take that lightly and to even pursue it in a way that doesn't feel like graspy that I need this, but to enjoy the potential of what those relationships can offer. I know my life has been profoundly changed by having spiritual friends and being a part of a sangha. And maybe it was also timing and there are so many things, but I don't think it's emphasized enough how Sangha is so supportive for the development of the heart, the mind, and yeah, the path.
Peace.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for speaking with me today. This is such a treat, and what a beautiful note to end on too. Just I think sometimes I think of like, oh, how important the song is, how important community is. But when you phrase it like spiritual friends, there's just something about like this idea that we're all kind of journeying through different things, and we can all add to each other's growth and to some degree, and to have that community that can be a little bit more open. It doesn't necessarily always have to have a specific Buddhist
Mhm.
label on it too. So
Right.
so wonderful, and then thank you for making so many things available, especially upcoming. Just one more time for those that are interested. There is the Compass of Wise Intention online at 2 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, September 21st at sangha.live, and then in person and online there is the Rooted in Refuge, Moved by Intention: A Courageous Heart in a Polarized World. That's October 25th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. I don't know if I said it already, but New York Insight Meditation Center. So thank you for making those things available, and thank you for spending your time with me today.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation to, yeah, be in conversation with you.